and I was trying to find that.
Mm.
Might not be able to find it yet here. But it's okay. I can verbalize it.
And if we need to, like, we could send it out as an attachment too.
Okay.
When we do kind of the recap and send the video. So we could say, hey, he referenced this document and it's attached here.
Okay. All right. I think let's just go ahead and let him in. I'll be all right without it.
I'll go ahead and admit everybody in. I'm going to keep track of the waiting room while Paige navigates our blank space here. Here we go.
My specialty.
That's right.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We're already here. First Wednesday of April. Kind of crazy. It seems like we had just started March and here we are. So, anything in the first week of a month always sneaks up on me. So glad that you are all here. We're really excited about our presentation today with Dr. Jared Smith. We'll get started with that in a few minutes here. I know we've got people still joining us in the first few minutes here. So we'll give them time to do that. But while we have this space too, I wanted to extend an invitation. We, as many of you know, Waterloo Community Foundation has moved into a new office downtown Waterloo, and we share the space with the Otto Schweitz Foundation, McElroy Trust, and Blackhawk County Gaming Association. And we're really excited about the new space and to be working together and collaborating in some neat ways that we think will be able to serve the community better. But we have an open house coming up a week from today on April 10th. From 4 to 5:30. So if you would like to stop by and say hi and check out our space, we would love to see you guys here. We really want this to be a place where people feel that they can stop by and feel comfortable and know who's in the building and how to get here and all of that stuff. So if you are available next Wednesday and would like to stop by, we would love to see you for that. So our address down here is 114 East 4th Street in Suite 300. And so you can find that on like our Facebook page and our website and through our emails and all of that too. I don't expect you to remember that from me just saying it, but just wanted to extend the invite so you guys know that you're welcome to stop by for that. I think we'll go ahead and get started here. So again, kind of the official good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for Windows on Waterloo today. My name is Paige Price. I'm the program manager here at the Waterloo Community Foundation, and so I get to be part of these monthly gatherings that we host here for Windows on Waterloo. And today we're really excited to welcome our Waterloo Schools Superintendent, Dr. Jared Smith, a familiar face to many. He is joining us today to share more about like the vision and some of the proposed plans for a new combined high school here in Waterloo. And we're really excited for the opportunity to learn more about that directly from him today. I know there's lots of rumblings around the community and it's a really big deal. And so we're excited that he was able to join us today and share some of that information in this space. So we plan to have time for some Q&A at the end of his presentation as well. So if you have questions come up throughout the information that he's presenting, feel free to type those into the chat box and we'll pass those on to Dr. Smith at the end of his presentation. With that, I will just turn things over to Dr. Jared Smith. Thank you so much for being here.
Hey, thank you guys for inviting me. Super excited to share about what's going on with this project. I know this is a well-informed group of people who are well-connected. So any way that we can get the story out about kind of what's going on in the district, whether it's the high school project or really anything else we've got going on, like I'm always going to take up that opportunity. So yeah, super excited to be here today. Just real quick, I think most of you know I grew up in Waterloo, and so have that like intrinsic just like motivation to really see the community thrive. I mean, anybody who's in my position should have that should have that motivation. But as somebody who's grown up in the system and in the school district, and then grown up in the community, like really have like a deep passion for seeing the Waterloo schools, the Waterloo community, and really the Cedar Valley in general be successful. So I started this position almost 2 years ago, and kind of right, there's right when I got started, more like in July or August of that first year, was brought to my attention that, hey, there's been some talks actually for a number of years about what to do with our aging high schools. And so a lot of people know this, but maybe not all of you. You know, every school district goes through a process of renovating their schools over time. And the way it's worked in the Waterloo schools is really starting back in around 2000. In 2000-ish, the school district made a commitment to really renovating our elementary schools. So we had in 2000, we had some very old elementary schools, which some of you may have attended if you grew up in this area, like Edison and Jewett and Longfellow and Grant. I mean, the list goes on and on, right? So starting in around 2000, the district said, hey, we're going to renovate our elementary schools. And so what's really cool about our district is from 2022 up until last year, we have renovated every single elementary school in this district. Starting in 2002 was Cunningham. And so that marked its 20-year anniversary, I guess, 2 years ago. But so renovating schools in any district is a typical thing. Along with that, we've also renovated a couple of our middle schools. We've renovated Carver Middle School, which used to be the old Logan. And so the new Carver opened, I'm always bad with years, but it was at least about 12, 13 years ago, the new Carver opened. We also just recently renovated Central Middle School, which I'll come back to, but Central Middle School, which some people maybe attended there as Central High School in the 70s or 80s, is completely renovated right now as of this year. And so what I'm getting at is that of our 19 buildings in the district, we have renovated in the last 20 years, 13 of those 19 buildings. So as a school district, we have to determine, okay, what's next? What's next on the list? And as we've talked prior to me getting here, and even in the last couple of years since I've gotten here, is the most glaring issue we have right now are our two high schools. And those high schools are East High and West High. Now, a case could be made about Expo, which is the old McKinstry, which is where our alternative high school is at. A case could also be made for Hoover and Bunger, which are our two other middle schools that are a little bit older. But when you actually look at the age of the buildings, and specifically East High was built and again, I'm not great with years. That's why I always have the experts here in the room with me. I'm like, what year was that built? But it was around 1916, 1917 that East High was built. So East High is a beautiful building. It's got a lot of history and tradition. But East High now is past 105 years old, just not too long ago. So in terms of school building years, most buildings last about 70 years is the rule of thumb for a school building. So East High is about 35 years past its supposed livable age, right? Now, schools don't always have a ton of money, as you guys know. So we've made do. East is we still have our high school there, 9 through 12. It's still turning out students are being successful. Our teachers are doing some great things. But we are starting to fall behind the times in terms of making sure that our learning spaces are meeting the needs of students in the 21st century. So if you go to a lot of school districts around the area, and I'm in the Cedar Valley, almost all of them have or will have a new high school, a relatively new high school. Our neighbors just to the west, Cedar Falls, prime example, they will be opening their brand new high school next year. I had a chance to walk through that high school, and it's a beautiful high school. Super excited for that group. But also, it leaves us a little bit like, hey, what are we going to do? You know, Cedar Falls next to us is got this brand new beautiful high school they've got for their students. And in a world where parents have choice over where their kids go to school, we feel like we need to give our kids and our families a facility that would meet the needs just as well as those other area districts do. West High, I mentioned East High was built in the 1916, 17. West High is about 65 years old. So not nearly as old as East High, but still we're getting pretty close to that like 70-year age span of most buildings. And again, you walk through West High, we're making it work. That's where I went to high school. There's been some changes since I graduated in 2000, but a lot of the building is still the same. It's still the same of when I graduated 24 years ago. Again, nothing wrong with that. But if we're in a hyper competitive world of schools now, where, like I said, where students can go wherever they want, like we need to be forward thinking in making sure that we are giving our students every opportunity to be successful as compared to their peers that they are, growing up with. So knowing that East High and West High need to be figured out, we looked at all of our options about how we could, how could we update, renovate, or build new both East High and West High. And we kind of talked about all of the different options. And we know there's a lot of history about those campuses, about where East High is located, about where West High's campus is. A lot of alumni love those campuses. And we looked at some options about, well, could we build on those campuses? So could East or West still be operating as they are right now? And could we find a space on those campuses where we could build a brand new school? After investigating that for both East High and West High campus, we just don't have the number of acres on those sites to build a brand new high school on those sites. We just don't have this. I mean, it takes a lot of space. People underestimate how much space you need to build a new high school. So we knew that just the space we have that was not the current buildings would not work for building a new East High, a new West High. Then we talked about, well, could we tear down and build in the same exact spot? So instead of finding a different spot on campus, could we just tear down that building and rebuild on that same exact spot? The two issues we ran into with this were that the biggest issue is what do you do with those kids? What do you do with what do you do with West High School for those years that a new building would be built? We estimate to tear down and to build up a high school takes on the ultra fast side 4 years, on the probably conservative realistic side 5 years. So let's just say 5 years. What do you do with West High kids for 5 years while that building is being built? There's 1,700 kids and about 250 employees at West High. So you're talking about 2,000 people. Where do you displace 2,000 people at for 5 years? You'd have to get ultra creative. I haven't personally heard of a district who's done it quite like that. Most just build new for that purpose. So we wrestled with that. And the same thing for East High, right? Like if we were to tear down East, build it back up, 4 to 5 years, what do you do with the kids at East? So we had those discussions, and then we looked over, we've got the central campus, and I'm going to just share my screen real quick. Let's see here. Give me 1 second. Share screen. Can you guys see that okay? Okay. So we have, and this is a visual I put on I use on social media. I'm gonna explain what this is here in a second, but currently our school district owns this land over here, which I consider to be like the central / WCC campus. So we've got, as you can see, we have a lot of land over here. We've got, and currently, and it's kind of hard for me. I hope I'm explaining this well. It's hard for me when I'm not seeing all your faces and reading body language, but I'm going to try my best here. But currently this is what is currently Central Middle School right here. And you can follow my cursor, correct? To next to that, adjacent is what is the WCC, or the Waterloo Career Center. Behind that, which is going to be open for our students next year, we call this the WCCX, or the expansion building. This is going to house new programs for our Career Center students next year. Okay, we also have the stadium, which opened in the mid-90s, which has served us well. It's home to East and West High football and track meets and some soccer games. But we had the discussion about, we've got East High, West High campus. We're running into like not knowing what to do with students during those 4 or 5 years. Or do we use a piece of land which is already existing, which we've already got many of our programs out here with the Career Center? Do we look at using this land to create a new comprehensive 10 through 12th grade high school? And what we're looking at is using the land that is, and I always get mixed around. I don't know if this is exactly, I'm going to say to the south, although I think it's more to the west and to the south. Do we look at using this piece of land down here, which we already own, to add like basically a number like 50 new 50 new classrooms, and a new like performing arts center, a new auditorium. That was kind of the vision on this south side. And then up here more on this north side next to the stadium was, could we build a top of the line, state of the art, like new gymnasium for our students? So after a lot of conversation, we thought it would make more sense to use this piece of land here because we have additional space, and we already have the Career Center and the Career Center expansion, and we could use the current Central Middle School we could transform that into part of the high school. So after a number of conversations with our internal leadership team, we felt like this was the better scenario for us because we could build new classrooms, new auditorium, new gymnasium, and not impact any learning in any of our existing schools because it's new construction. So instead of impacting students for 4 or 5 years at East or at West, we'd be able to build new in these spaces next to the existing facilities that we already have. Now, in addition, the news that just came out a couple weeks ago was we just successfully acquired this land here, which is about 30 acres. That is obviously adjacent to the current Central Middle School WCC, land that we own. The vision for this land is that 2 things. One is we have a brand new ag science program, so like an ag program, an FFA program, whatever you want to call it, that will be starting next year at the Career Center. Our plan is to use part of this land probably here to the south side. And again, I don't know if it's the south or depending on how that you look at it, but that would be land that the kids could actually like harvest or like grow crops, and a really unique hands-on learning experience for our students. The vision then would be for the northernmost 20 acres would be land that would be available for potential baseball, softball, soccer fields for a potential 10 through 12 high school. So I think that gives you a little bit of a visual for kind of the land that we are dealing with here. Right now, let me be clear, like your main takeaway should be that like we own all of this now, this big L, right? And we have all of this that to our disposal here that would not impact anything else going on currently at the east or west campuses. I'm going to stop share here. So I mentioned, and there's so many, like usually when I give this speech, it's usually like, I mean, I could take 2 hours giving this. So I'm going to try to give the high points, but I definitely want you to put your questions in the chat because I want to come back to those because I'm jumping over a lot of things. But you probably heard me say 10th through 12th grade, right? So under this scenario, and again, I keep saying scenario because this isn't official yet, and I'll explain the timeline here in a little bit. But we would be looking at just 10th, 11th, 12th grade. So if you, and what we would do is we would take the 10th, 11th, and 12th out of both East and West High, and we would bring those students to one campus out at Central Middle School WCC. So East High and West High would no longer be they're currently 9th through 12th grade buildings. They would go from being 9th through 12th grade buildings to 8th and 9th grade buildings. So they would no longer be our comprehensive high schools. They would now be 8th and 9th grade. And again, what do you call those middle schools? Do you call those intermediate schools? Like there's really no perfect name for what you would call an 8th, 9th grade building. In addition to East High and West High being 8th and 9th grade buildings, then we would go from 4 middle schools down to 3. Because remember, Central would no longer be a middle school. That would be part of the new high school. So now you've got Carver, you've got Hoover, and you've got Bunger. Our other 3 middle schools would now be 6th and 7th grade buildings. So let me lay that out for you again real quick. So our elementary schools would still remain kindergarten through 5th grade or preschool depending on the building. So pre-K through 5th. Then you've got Carver, you've got Hoover, you've got Bunger, which would be 6th and 7th grade buildings. Then you've got East High and West High, which would turn into 8th and 9th grade buildings. Then you've got the new Waterloo High School, and I don't know what it would be called, but maybe we'll just call it Waterloo High School for the purpose of today. That would be 1, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade campus. In terms of enrollment of that school, we anticipate, based on our enrollment numbers, that would be roughly 2,000 students. For context, right now, West High is about 1,700 kids. So the number of students at this one campus would be about 300 kids more than West High right now. For some people, that seems pretty big. I totally get that. We would be, according to enrollment numbers across the state, we would be about the 8th, 9th largest high school in the state. There's a number of schools in the Des Moines area that are more than 2,000 students. So we would not be the largest high school in the state. We'd be one of the largest, but we would not be the largest, which is kind of some of the concern I'm hearing is about how big that seems. What's kind of funny is my dad was a graduate of West High in 1970, and my understanding at that time is, and again, my understanding is that there's been over 2,000 students in West High before. So having a high school of that size is something that the city has seen before. This is not uncommon. So that kind of gives you just an idea of the grade configuration. We are very adamant about keeping East High and West High. There's a lot, as we bring this information to the community, I would say most people are pretty excited. They see the vision of this. They see the financial impact it's going to have. I've talked to realtors and businesses. there's a lot that can be said for state-of-the-art, top-of-the-line schools. When you move into a new community, from a parent's perspective, you always want to know, like, tell me about the schools. And we feel like having and I'm not gonna I'm not being sarcastic when I say this, like this, and I wish I could, I told Aaron and Paige before, like, I have some early renderings of what this could look like sitting on my desktop here. I wish I could share those with you now. I'm not able to share them with you quite yet because you have to go through like the chain of like communication, and like a couple of my board members haven't even seen those yet. So I got to be really careful before I start sharing them to a large community group that some people feel slighted if I don't share those. But the renderings and the early floor plans, this high school will be the best like comprehensive high school in the state. And when I say best is best is maybe not the right word, but it's going to be the most like robust. It's going to be cost wise, it's going to be, when you combine what we're looking at plus what's already been invested into that land, this will be the biggest high school project the state has ever seen, and it's not even close. So I think it's super exciting for the community, for our students, for our parents, for our staff, for our businesses, and for like our homeowners, right? Now, when I talk about money, I got to be careful here, right? Because people are like, well, how are you paying for that? Like, and again, I could probably spend half an hour explaining how like funds in schools work. But basically I want to be clear because some of you might not understand this. Like, there's one side of our budget that is what we call our general fund. Our general fund is the money that pays for employee salaries, pays for benefits, it pays for all of like our day-to-day operations, right? And so that budget, we run a budget of about $160 million each year, and we have roughly 1,700 paid employees. That's one completely separate fund. That's a general fund, and that is the way we get money there on this end is from it's basically for state funding. So for each student that we have in the district, we get like roughly $8,000 per student, $8,000 per student. So if you take $8,000 per student times 10,000 kids, whatever that number comes to is 80 million. My math isn't that great on the spot here, but that's one pot of money. On the other end of the spectrum is the money that we have that goes towards building projects. So I want to be clear, you probably have seen in the news, like all these school districts that are making budget reductions, that are getting tight with their budget. Like, we also are having to get very lean with our budget, but we can get lean with our budget with our staff using separate funds as opposed to our funds that pay for buildings. Okay, so I want to be clear. I'm hoping you come away with understanding we're not taking any money away from our staff, from our day-to-day operations to pursue this plan for this high school project. Now, within this other pot of money, there's basically two ways that you can pay for new projects. There's two ways to pay for new building projects. The one is to use property tax to pay for building projects. And we are not using any property tax to pay for this project. So an example of that is, you probably heard, if you follow the news, like last fall, both Cedar Rapids and Dubuque went to their communities and said, hey, we want new buildings. Can you vote on this? Can you vote on this to raise property tax to pay for our new buildings? And in both of those communities, the community voted no. We do not want to raise our property tax to pay for new buildings. We feel so that's one option, is to raise property tax, and we're not going that route with this plan. So when we choose not to use property tax, we do not have to go to the community for a vote. So in a lot of districts, you will hear the term bond referendum. So in a bond referendum, and Cedar Falls did this as well. You probably remember several years ago, Cedar Falls tried to get a new high school approved. And I think it took them 3 or maybe 4 bond referendums to get the project approved. So I don't know exactly how Cedar Falls is paying for their project, but my understanding is that the part of that is property tax paying for their high school. Okay, so the key takeaway I want all of you to take is that we're not using property taxes to pay for this potential high school. Instead, another funding stream is through 1% sales tax. So schools, and this started like 20 years ago, and this is how it's funded all of our elementary schools, is each year we get money from the state based on sales tax. So each dollar that you spend, 1 cent of that dollar goes to this like sales tax, right? That would, it's like, what is it, 7 cents here? So of the 7 cents, 1 cent goes back to the school district. So with that money then, that allows us to do our building projects. That 1% sales tax that comes back to us has allowed us to do every single project in the last 20 years. So what we're doing in this project is we're going to use that money and we're going to like basically take it out as like we're going to draw on that money for like the next, I forget how many years it is, but the next 10 plus years. So we're basically like kind of taking out a mortgage using that 1% sales tax that we can get to be able to fund this project. So I want to be clear for this group walking away from here, we're not using any of the money from our teacher salaries or teacher benefits. We're not using anything from the property tax or raising property taxes. The money that will be used is the 1% sales tax money that we get each year. And each year, just to give you an idea, I believe our district gets roughly $11 or $12 million per year from the 1% sales tax. So if you do the math and you take that, if you take out that a loan or a mortgage for the next 10 plus years times $12 million, you get $120, $130 million. We do anticipate that number going up each year. So the total cost of this project that we're looking at is about $165 million, which is, again, I look at that as exciting because when you look at high school projects around the state, the only examples that we have of really new high school projects that are full school renovations are mostly in your suburban school districts, your affluent school districts. This will be the first that we're aware of blue collar urban school district that is building something to this magnitude. So we're excited about the opportunities for our kids. I've had a chance to meet with a number of kids and talk about it, who are like our main customers here, because like a lot of adults have opinions on this, but when you talk to kids, like they are super excited about like being in a brand new building, brand new facility, top of the line, something to be proud of. So I went through that super, super quick. And I know I missed like 30 different points that I should have hit. But I'm excited to answer your questions and like engage in some dialogue around this.
Yeah, that's great. We do have some questions coming in here, Jared. So I will just start from the top, and there's a few that are similar or that you've even addressed by now. But one of the first is, how will this project impact Expo students? Will they be on the new campus as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I literally just came from a meeting talking about this exact topic. So our plan is McKinstry. I don't, again, that used to be the old McKinstry, and I'm not a historian. Like I will learn these things over the years. I just don't have all that data right up here off the top of my head, but very old building. If you've been in Expo, we're making it do, right? All school districts, we make do with what we got. But Expo is, man, it is an old building. And yes, our plan is to eventually move all of, and we got different programs out there, right? Which I could go into detail about that. But long story short, yes, our plan is to move Expo out of that building. What we're debating on is, do we move all of Expo? And there's different programs out there. It's not just Expo High School. We've also got some behavior programs. We've also got some like online after school programs. But do all of those programs go into this potential new middle school? I'm sorry, potential new high school? Or do we piece them out where certain programs go to the new high school, certain programs go to East, certain programs go to West? The reason I say East or West is because remember, East and West both will be going from 9th through 12th grade buildings to 8th and 9th grade buildings, meaning we've got a lot more space at East and West to move programs from Expo into those buildings. So our goal, and I didn't explain this, I should have, the timeline on this would be if everything goes according to plan. And when I say according to plan, really it comes down to a school board vote. Our school board ultimately has to vote on this project. They're going to be voting on this project in July, on July 8th. If they approve this project in July, we would break ground in 2025. And the goal would be for this building to be open in the fall of 2028. So going back to your question about Expo, our goal by 2028 is to have everything moved out of Expo so we can shut that building down.
Okay, great. Another question was about the status of the Eastside Athletic Campus project and how these changes would affect that project.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we were very transparent when the East High Athletic Project folks came to us. Right when I started, they said, "Hey, like we've got this vision for a very nice athletic campus on the current East High School campus," and we said, "Oh my gosh, this looks incredible! Like we love this for our kids." East High, like you could say the same thing for East or West, but in terms of like the baseball and softball facilities at East High, like they're behind in terms of our competitors in the MVC conference. Like we're behind in terms of facilities. So when they came to us like roughly 2 years ago and said, "Hey, we've got this vision for this project," we were supportive right off the bat. We also told them, "Hey, just so you know, like there's a chance we might be looking at a comprehensive 10th through 12th grade project out at Central." And we asked them, "Does this impact what you guys want to do at East High?" And we both agreed that regardless if East High stays a 9th through 12th grade campus, or if it transitions to an 8th, 9th grade campus, that will still be an amazing complex for our students and our community. So long story short, we are both, that is moving forward. We are supportive. We've actually purchased, we kind of got them kickstarted with, our baseball field didn't actually have lights. So we were the only, I think we were the only 4A school district in the state that didn't have lights on their baseball field. So those are purchased and those will be ready to go. I forget if it's for this, I'm forgetting right now if it's this season or next season, but either way, we are supportive of that project, and that project is moving forward with their group, regardless if this high school project moves forward or not.
Great. On the subject of sports and really any extracurriculars, somebody was asking about with switching from 9th through 12th to 10th through 12th for 9th graders who are participating yet in those high school extracurriculars. What are kind of the solutions for the transportation and scheduling needed for them to be able to participate?
So a couple of thoughts I have. First thought is that this grade configuration is very common. If you go to Cedar Falls, right, they've got a same grade configuration where 9th grade's at Pete or Holmes, and then 10th grade is at the high school. I don't have all of the we're kind of like, what happens first? Do we come up with do we make all these plans before a project is finalized, or do we wait until like the board gives their blessing on it? So we've been a little like, we haven't quite dug into exactly, okay, what happens with wrestling? What happens with all these different, until we know for sure this project moves forward. But what you will see in our district is very similar to what you see in a lot of the districts that have like separate ninth grade separate from 10 through 12. Which is certain sports will practice together. So like wrestling would be example. And again, I'm not the expert here, but I believe those ninth graders get transported over to where the high school, to where the 10th through 12th graders are at, so they can be part of that practice. However, there's certain sports, for example, basketball, where you traditionally have a separate like ninth grade team. So in those circumstances, unless players get moved up to like varsity or get moved up to like a sophomore or JV team, a lot of those ninth graders would stay on campus at their current school. So I guess what I'm getting at is there's a lot that we haven't quite ironed out. We're still, 5 school years out from this happening. We do know there's a lot of school districts who are in the same boat. If you go down to the Des Moines metro area, a lot of those suburban school districts have this similar grade configuration. And they've all, I guess, why reinvent the wheel? We're going to lean a lot on like what other districts are doing with their athletics to kind of determine what that looks like. One thing I'm going to add too, I'm going to share my screen one more time here, is I'm going to share a work session that we have coming up with our school board that we're going to kind of talk about this topic. So hold on one second. Okay, can you see that? Okay. So we've done a lot of listening sessions with the community. We've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We basically had 6 town hall meetings so far. And I think some of you have attended those. We appreciate it. Now we're doing some board work sessions. And just last week, we had our first board work session where we invited the community to come in and to hear a presentation from our leadership team on the topic of chronic absenteeism. So what's happened is as we've had these town hall meetings, some common themes of questions have popped up at those town hall meetings. And our goal is to continue to address those common themes that we're hearing about questions about the new high school. So last week, we spent 90 minutes talking about how a new high school would address the issue of chronic absenteeism. And if you watch the news this morning on KWWL, I believe they ran the story this morning about our as a district, and just like every other urban district in the state, we're really struggling and trying to address the issue of absenteeism in our schools. So we feel like a new high school, by having, for a number of reasons, would help address our issues with chronic absenteeism. What I'm getting at here is that we've got 2 more work sessions coming up. One on April 23rd, one on May 28th. The one in April is about academics and student achievement. How will this new high school address academics and student achievement? How will this help our district succeed in these areas? And ironically, you asked about activities, transportation. We're going to have a full work session on May 28th for 90 minutes spent addressing our thoughts on how what activities will look like and what transportation will look like. So if you have any in the next, that's 2 months from now, almost 3 months from now. I'm sorry, almost 2 months from now. You can have it. We're going to figure out some more of that question. And also you can come and listen to our leadership team talk about our thoughts behind transportation activities. So a shameless plug for the 2 more work sessions we have coming up that we encourage all community members to attend.
Awesome. Okay. Lost my spot there in the chat for a second. Okay, can you tell us a little bit about the improvements and upgrades needed for the current west and east buildings for our 8th and 9th graders to be there, and kind of the long-term plan for that. And I saw another question about like, what do you do with the kids in those spaces while they're renovated? And
Yep.
can you tell us a little bit about those plans?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, like East and West are still, we still have all of our kids in there, right? So this is a delicate balance of me saying that those buildings need work, but also we're gonna have to keep kids in those buildings, right? Like we don't have anywhere else for them to go. Please keep in mind that this is the natural progression of like fixing your schools. Like every district goes through this in terms of, okay, we've got some schools that are in great shape. We've got other schools that need to be addressed. So let's assume this project goes through and all 10th through 12th grade students are moved out to Central. Now we basically have, and we talked about Expo. We would love to like take Expo offline. So basically we have more buildings of our 19 to address. East High, West High, Bunger, and Hoover. So at that point, we will need to figure out what's our top priority. Do we fix East and West? Do we fix Bunger and Hoover? And there's a lot of people, there's just a lot of thoughts out there. And as a district, we're going to figure out which of those buildings comes first. In terms of age, East High is the oldest. So if our focus turns to East High, by having only 2 grade levels as opposed to 4 grade levels in East High, it gives us a lot of flexibility. So an example, I was a former assistant principal at East High. And again, if you walk through East High, I had the privilege of doing a tour through Johnston High School a couple weeks ago, through Waukee High School, through the New Cedar Falls. Like, it's a night and day difference in terms of what the students in those schools get compared to what students at East High get, first and foremost. East High has a lot of great tradition. It's got a lot of character, right? But in terms of like the learning experiences and the learning spaces that those kids have, like it's not comparable. So I kind of feel like in the affluent districts, like the rich get richer, right? Like the kids who already have plenty that they're coming from also have the nicest schools. Like, to me, that kind of like motivates me, right? So what I'm getting at is there's opportunities in East High. If you only have 2 grade levels there as opposed to 4, we can systematically address spaces in those buildings. So what I could see, and I'm just giving an example, that there's a place we call at East High, it is the Annex. The Annex is like, it's like 2 sets of classrooms that are kind of like floor 2 and floor 3, that like we could shut those down and use only the interior, other parts of the building, and systematically address parts of East High and West High while we use other spaces for learning. So that would be, and again, we haven't really like said that's for sure what we're going to do, but we know if we get that figured out and get those students moved over to the central campus, we will have opportunities to systematically address the needs at East and West. Now, with that being said, like this is 2024. We still have buildings that don't have air conditioning, right? East and West are 2 prime examples. There's spaces at other buildings, but not nearly as bad at East or West. We are addressing those needs. We just approved a project to like do some major air conditioning HVAC upgrades at East and West. So we're still going to continue to, and that will be, it won't be ready for next year, but it'll be ready for the following year for 25, 26. So I guess again, a key takeaway you should know is like, we're not going to forget East and West. We're going to systematically address those needs. It's going to take some time, but we feel like this would be the next step that we need in order to make those changes.
We had somebody ask about, and I know just in the community, especially from alumni, there's the rich history of the rivalry between the schools and the sports and, all of that. And people have kind of a fond memory of some of those things. Can you talk about a little bit, maybe some things that you've heard from current students about how they feel about potentially losing some of that in this blending and combining of schools?
Yeah, so this blending and combining of schools, it is not, I will admit, it's not very common in large school districts. It's extremely common in small school districts. Like this merging of two schools. And again, that's why some communities like don't get along, like other small towns like Labrook, Rhinebeck, right? Like, I don't know what all happened down there, but I know like those communities did not want to like be together, right? So this is not uncommon, of this combining of schools. There's a rich history at East and West, absolutely. Like graduated from West, right? Like, and for a lot of alumni, like wrapping your head around like going to school with somebody from East or from West is like really hard to fathom, right? What we're finding with today's kids, okay, and today we here in education, we like today's kids, right? But today's kids are like so interconnected, like that it's unfathomable, like like through social media, through all these different ways, through the video games they play, and they're playing against people from across the city or across country. What I'm hearing from East and West kids is like they're all friends. Like they're already like hanging out together, like whether it's in person or virtually. Like it's totally different than 30 years ago where you literally never saw somebody from East or West unless it was on the football field, unless it was on the basketball court. These kids see each other all the time. So when I talk to them, um, and I've talked to a number of students, like they are a little uneasy about the tradition going away. Like what's going to happen to homecoming? Like that's our biggest rival, right? Is East or West. But what they're telling me is they're like excited about the opportunity. They're like, wait, we can combine our team and their team and create like a super team. Like they're like, we're going to be winning state titles. We're going to be competitive. Like right now, I'll be honest, and I'm not afraid to share this. Like we've struggled to remain competitive in athletics and even on the fine arts side, right? And I've said this in a number of settings. Like this will allow us to be much more competitive on the state at the state level. And there's different ways you can look at it. Is success the most important thing? Is participation the most important thing? We feel like it's going to help across the all aspects. So when I've talked to kids about this, and even some of our staff, like there's going to take a little bit of adjustment. What I've heard from schools that that have had to merge is that first couple months, maybe there's some like awkwardness and the cliques and the groups and the staying away and the staring down other students. But there's a lot of pride in this community. And I've asked the kids this, like, hey, you go to East, right? Yes. Let me ask you, when like West goes and plays other schools, do you cheer for them or do you root against them? Oh, we cheer for them. There's a lot of pride in this community, like this, that we want our East and West to be successful. The kids are saying they would come together. What I'm seeing with our kids is it's funny, and this is, you've probably seen this too, is a lot of times kids just go with the flow. It's the adults that sometimes have the bigger issue about change. Like kids are like, you might have different opinions, but our kids seem to go along with change much easier at times than adults do. And we feel like that's not going to be any different here.
Yeah, to kind of piggyback off of that, somebody had also asked about that there are some cultural differences and mindsets between our schools as well, and if you perceive any issues integrating cultures and backgrounds into one building.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what people who've grown up in Waterloo, um, and again, these are some tricky topics that I don't mind like talking about, but like people who've grown up in Waterloo kind of think that Water West is like the fluent school. It's very homogeneous, whereas like East is more the blue collar school, and it's very like heterogeneous, like mixed, right? That was probably the way it was in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. Like people are surprised when I show them what the demographic makeup is of both East and West now. They're almost, when you look at the demographic makeup, and when I'm talking about like the minority rates or like the socioeconomic status, like it's almost a point of being like not quite identical, but it's very much similar. The demographics have completely shifted in the Waterloo schools, where now we are 60% 60% minority students and 40% Caucasian. So if you walk into East or West, like the student makeup, and I get what the question is because we think of what it was like when we were there. Um, it is much different, meaning the blending of cultures has already kind of happened at West. I think that's what people are getting at with that question. That even some of schools, like you look at like what are considered like our West Side schools, like a Hoover or a Lou Henry, or even like a Central, I guess you could say, are becoming more and more a melting pot of students and families. So I guess my question, I guess that my response to that is that a lot of that is happening already. I would say maybe a little bit bigger um, wonder I have is when each staff in each building has its culture too. So it's like, how do you combine like two businesses? I've heard people who've combined I'm not a business person, but I've talked to people who've combined businesses. They say that's a culture shock when you take one leadership, one way of leadership and working with another way of leadership and working and blending that. More my wonder is how are we going to blend the two staffs? I think the students are fine. And I'm not just saying that, but I have a chance. I'm in the buildings all the time. And if you just like put me in a hallway and I didn't know if it was East or West, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you like what building I'm in because our student populations are so mixed now. I think it's going to be more how do you combine the two employee cultures and make it one? That'd be my response to that.
That's interesting. That's interesting. Thanks for speaking more into that. We also had a question about transportation and if busing will be impacted, especially for kids that are coming from Evansdale or like the far east side of Waterloo. Do you think there will be an increased need to transport kids?
Yeah, so I got another visual here I'll share with you guys because this has came up quite a bit. These are all fair questions. Like, I'm going to share my screen one more time. So we put this out there. Oh, where are we at? Hold on. Of course, I don't really want you to see my desktop here. Hold on one second. Hold on 1 second here. Let's try this again. Can you see that okay? All right. So this is a graphic that we put out there because we had the same question, right? So over here, the far westernmost part of the city is where the potential high school would be. So what we did was we actually like compared the commutes from like several different points in the city in Waterloo and Evansdale. And first and foremost, so like there's so many there's so many different ways I could talk about this for like literally half an hour. Is the commute from from Elk Run Heights, from Evansdale, from North, well, let's just stay over here. Is that going to be a longer commute here to the new high school as compared to East High, which is right here? Absolutely. It is. Now, depending on some other locations, there's a shorter commute, but in general, it is a longer commute. I agree with that from, to go way over to the west side of our district. Now, with that being said, what people often forget about is we have a number of students who are accessing the Career Center right now. So let's pretend I'm a student who lives in Elk Run Heights. I live at the number 2 here. And I drive my car into East High and have school at East High, right? What they do during the day right now is they hop in their car and drive over to the Career Center for a class or 2. Okay, so I'm gonna say that again. So if I'm a senior, lives right here, and I drive in for first and second period at East High, and then, it's third period, my next class is at the Career Center, which a large percent of our students at East High have, they hop in their car and drive over to the Career Center for a class. So then they take, let's just make this up. The second half of the day, they are in class at the Career Center. Then they drive home Highway 20 back to Elk Run. What we're getting at here is for the students who access the Career Center, and that's our goal. We love the Career Center. Our kids are showing incredible